Hey guys, today we're going to talk about stuff and its different properties. Because this is a chemistry class though, we are not going to be referring to it as stuff, we're going to be referring to it by a technical name of matter, which is just a fancy way of saying stuff. So what is stuff though? Stuff is anything that's made of particles that have mass and volume. Now, we've talked a little bit about particles already. Particles are just tiny, itty-bitty bits of stuff. Things like atoms and molecules would be considered particles. But we're going to go into depth on mass and volume. The mass of an object is just how much heft it has. And it's equal to the number of particles. More particles means more heft. So something like this hammer has a significant amount of particles, a significant amount of heft and mass. Same thing with this tape measure. Whereas something like a balloon would have a lot less mass, a lot less particles inside of it. And that's okay. Different objects can have different masses, and even something with just a tiny amount of heft, a tiny amount of particles, still is considered matter, still has mass. The base unit of mass is a gram. We measure mass in grams. And a gram of mass is equal to about a paper clip's worth of particles. So this paper clip has a gram of particles inside of it, a gram of mass. To measure mass, we use a balance, okay? And I have a balance sitting in front of me. The way a balance works is you take two objects, put them on either side of the balance, and whichever side the object tilts towards has the most mass to it. In this case, the hammer has more heft to it than the balloon does, and it has more particles, more mass. Quick note on using a balance. Before using a balance, you need to tare the balance, which just means when the balance is empty, you need to make sure that it actually is balanced. And to do that, you can look at this little arrow right here, this line, and make sure that it's perfectly lined up. And if it's not, you tare the balance by moving around this little counterweight. This helps you adjust it so that the balance is perfectly even to begin with. So that's mass. The second property of matter is volume. And the fact that matter has volume just means that its particles are taking up space. Volume is a measure of the amount of space that particles take up. So to go back to our example from earlier, the hammer and the balloon, even though the hammer had more mass to it, more heft and more particles, the balloon is taking up more space. It has fewer particles, but they're spread out further and they're taking more space up. The balloon's volume is larger. Now, the unit of volume is a liter. And a liter of space is equal to about the size of a quart of milk. So I'm holding a liter flask right here, and you can see that this is a liter of space. Now we've got a couple of ways to measure volume. The simplest way of measuring volume is, I'll move this. When you have something that's rectangular or cubic, you can take a tape measure, measure its length, its width, and its height, and you can multiply those three measurements together to find the volume of an object. If you're dealing with fluids and non-solids, you can use something like a volumetric flask from earlier to measure the volume of a fluid, or something called a graduated cylinder, in which you pour a fluid into the cylinder, and however much space it takes up will be marked on the side. okay, in these graduations, in these gradients.